Hey everybody, this is Marian Cowagoan.
And this is David Owen.
And this is You Show Me Yours, the podcast where a married couple talks about the movies and TV that they loved before the first date. And today, I was made to watch The Crow.
Yeah, The Crow. All right. I was going to say, caw, The Crow, and then I got cold feet.
Yeah,
The Crow, which is, of course, the 1994 Alex Proyas directed action goth shooty movie.
I was describing it in my head as a goth dystopian ghost.
Sure.
So that's
sure.
Yeah. And most of these episodes I tease you for saying of course, because they're things that I've never heard of. But this time, yes, of course.
Of course.
That infamous movie.
Yes, because everyone's heard of it because of a tragedy that's attached to it that we will almost certainly talk about.
Yes. I don't know how I had not seen this because it was very much up my alley.
Oh yeah, it was. It was just the timing was right. I'm sure you probably went to high school with some guys that were really into The Crow or early college.
Oh yeah,
with some guys that were really.
I seem to recall the poster on many, many dorm room walls, and actually, minor thing, but one character in here has that haircut where it's an undercut.
Yes,
and then they have enough for a ponytail.
Yep.
A guy in my class who was the edgiest of us all totally had that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, when that haircut came into popularity, there was a guy. His name was Tim. I can't remember his last name, but I know it was his last name was alliterative or something. So that my thing with him was that I always called him by his full name because it just sounded cool.
I'm sure he loved that.
Oh, he did. He loved it. No, it's Tim Thornton. Tim Thornton was his name. Tim Thornton. So I always called him Tim Thornton. Say, hey, Tim Thornton, what's up?
Wait, for real? I used to work with a Tim Thornton.
Well, maybe it was him. Was he a redhead?
No.
Okay. Tim Thornton was a redhead.
Well, shocking. There are two people named Tim Thornton in the world.
I can't believe it.
Anyway.
So he had the undercut. And at the time, I thought it was the coolest thing. But while I had long hair, I didn't have long hair all over when that first became popular because I was just at the end of my mullet. My mullet phase in 90, 91 or 92, maybe. I can't remember. It was maybe first year of high school, last year of middle school for me. So yeah, early 90s. And yeah, when it became popular, I still had the mullet in full effect, short, business in the front, etc. And so I purposely started growing out my hair to do one of those undercut top knot haircuts, but by the time everything got grown out to the same length, it was 2 years later and it wasn't popular anymore.
I was going to say,
and even Tim Thornton didn't have it anymore.
You probably had kind of a reverse undercut, long on the bottom and shorter on top.
Kind of. Yeah.
The mullet is an abomination. I'm sure in some cases it can be done and it doesn't look terrible, but there are some bad ones out there, and I keep waiting for it to come back because everything from the 90s is coming back.
Waiting for it to come back unironically, because there are people who currently wear mullets ironically. Yeah. There's a certain point, I think mustaches have kind of come back unironically.
Sure.
For the youth, I say the youth, but 25-year-olds.
Yeah. That's how you know you're old. The youth is 25.
I think they unironically wear mustaches, but when we were 25, having a mustache was an ironic choice. You had a mustache and you knew how goofy it was. Yeah. And everyone around you knew how goofy it was. But now I think people are just these are cool because it's been long enough, Our 10-year-old currently has long, flowing, beautiful hair. And the day that he comes home and says, Mom, I want to do this cool haircut I saw on TikTok, and it's a mullet, I will cry. Yeah. I will so cry. And by then he'll have his 12-year-old upper lip crust, and it'll be oh God, he'll look as skeezy as possible.
Bruh.
Yeah.
Anyway,
The Crow.
Back to The Crow.
We've been talking about The Crow the whole time.
There we go.
Let me lead you off with a fun fact as we imitate a crow. In the movie, it's not a crow.
It's a raven?
It's a raven, because in movies, it's always ravens because they are larger, so they look better on camera, and they are apparently far more intelligent, so they're trainable.
I was about to say, the crows that I've seen in my life don't look like they could be trained. Well, and there was a point where he quotes the Raven.
Yeah.
And I was like, if you wanted to do that, you should have just called it the Raven.
Well, I don't remember. So, excuse me. So here's the thing. I'm a bad source for the source material, though I have read it when I was younger, and I did buy a copy in the lead up to this and perused it, but couldn't really get through it, which is something we can talk about. I guess we could talk about that now. So before that, quick plot synopsis, as you like for us to do. So Eric Draven is a rock star dude in a band called Hangman's Joke. And his wife is organizing the tenants of their building to for rent control, whatever, like there's some reason that they're trying to get thrown out or the rent's getting raised. And this leads her to run afoul of the local crime boss who sends his goons to rough him up. And it ends up, quote, going bad because Eric shows up and they both get killed. And then a crow spirit brings Eric back to life so he can kill them, and he does.
And then he
in about 24-hour period
goes back to peace, and we assume that he's with Shelley in the afterlife. And
yes. So this movie is incredibly straightforward in its plot, and it moves quickly. It takes place over a short period of time, and it really is just guy comes back from the dead, guy gets justice. He's an invulnerable Grim Reaper of justice, gets justice and returns to the grave.
Gets peace, yeah. Well, and it's a tight. It was like 96 minutes, something like that.
Just over an hour and a half. Yeah.
We were just lamenting the other night. Netflix. I stole this idea from somebody on Twitter. Netflix needs a category for 90 minutes of movies, and this would fall into that. Like
they really do. They need a category that's just like, because they've got that play something. I want it to be, like you were saying, I want it to be like play something under, under 60 minutes, play something under 90 minutes, play something under 200 minutes.
Yeah. I want to put in my filters.
Yes. So the source material, James O'Barr wrote The Crow, which is usually seen collected as a graphic novel these days. I do believe it came out episodic. I'm not 100% sure on that.
Oh, interesting. Because the credits said something about comic strip, which I think of as like in the paper.
I have never understood why it's credited like that. I don't know, because it's credited as James O'Barr based on the comic book and comic strip by James O'Barr. And I don't know why it's credited like that. We're talking about 1993, 94 here. So maybe we just haven't figured out we haven't settled in on the terminology, because years later, these things would be like something like Watchmen came out in a issue-based format and was then later collected as a graphic novel and mostly rose to its fame as a graphic novel, but it would be credited as based on the graphic novel. Yeah,
but when you say comic strip, though, that sounds like four panels once a day. It's in the daily paper. At best, it's in the alt weekly. Tom Tomorrow, that kind of stuff. But it's more, and it may have been, there may have the character's origins. I don't know for sure. But it's at least we're a step up from, it doesn't say based on the funny book by James O'Barr. So the source material is pretty crazy to actually translate into a movie, because the Crow doesn't speak that much. He doesn't interact with the living that much as he does in this movie. And when he speaks, it's always just like these long, like poetic soliloquies, and he like quotes actual poetry constantly. So I wonder if quoting the Raven, like I said, I didn't go back through the graphic novel to find it for sure. I wonder if that's just not them trying to nod to the fact that he spoke in poems almost exclusively in the comic when he interacted with the living. Oh, sure. I'm not 100% sure. Sure.
I don't know for sure, but yeah. So they could have called it the Raven, and but I think that was just
that die is cast. So
yes. But the comic is, things are a little bit different. I don't believe he's a rock star in the comics. They are killed on a lonely highway. Some of the names are flipped around of the bad guys. Some of the characteristics are flipped. Just different. There are different aspects to it that just happen. Like when you notice this from watching any adaptation. Yeah. Even in the most faithful adaptations, you end up with characters getting combined. For instance, Ernie Hudson's character, Officer Albrecht, is two police characters that are combined into one. One that he only briefly encounters, and the other one who is a detective who's kind of tracking his progress as happens in the movie. They just combine that into one character. Great. There you go. And stuff like that happens all the time. But in the source material, it's very much like it's created in the late 80s. So he actually has a mullet in the source material, like a rock star mullet, spiky in the front and long in the back. And he is constantly wearing just like leather pants and no shirt and just like all this kind of stuff. And one of the interesting things is that Brandon Lee, who plays Eric Draven in this movie, he actually really obsessed, apparently, this is what you hear years later, about duplicating James O'Barr's depiction of the Crow, which was of this just like effectively like he draws him like a male ballerina, just like tight, just like basically just a thin layer of skin pulled over taut muscles, slim but very well defined. So he was like fasting and doing all kinds of like he was basically like cutting weight, what that like fighters do, in order to just appear on screen as this just chiseled thing. Yeah. Like and they even talk about the reshoots and stuff, having trouble finding someone that could physically double him when they needed to reshoot after his death. And do things with that character. So it was, I mean, but the source material, it's fairly faithful, but I've always kind of viewed this as a Shining moment where Stanley Kubrick basically gleaned from the Shining book what he wanted and then made the movie that filled in the rest of the details with what he wanted to do.
It's inspired by, not necessarily
like the structure is the same. A lot of the characters and plot points are the same, and that you hit a lot of the same beats, but so much surrounding it has changed that it effectively created its own universe. And in the case of The Shining, at least, Stephen King literally wrote, almost effectively a sequel to the movie when he wrote Dr. Sleep. And the movie version of Dr. Sleep is very much a sequel to the movie version of The Shining, and not a sequel to the book The Shining. And just also it's interesting. It's interesting like that. And I kind of put those in my own headspace for whatever reason. I put those two movies in the same space, that it's this like heavily inspired, but really they decided to go in their own direction in the places that suited them, in changing him into a rock star, changing Eric into a say rock star, whatever, like he's in a local band. And changing his visual look a bit, and updating some of the stuff, like adding in the housing crisis stuff, I guess, or the housing crisis, the housing petition stuff that they do. Yeah,
the motive for the killing, as opposed to.
I don't believe in the graphic novel, as I recall. Top Dollar is quite this. I think the Top Dollar and T-Bird characters are switched in terms of who's more like the big bad. But again, like I said, it's not important. It's not important. But yeah, the source material is pretty worthwhile, if nothing else, as a time capsule. And to remember that this was kind of one of those books that came out along with The Watchmen and some of these other books, comic books that came out that were stepping away from what it meant to be a comic book. Like, he is a superhero, no doubt. Like, he has powers, but there is, adult theming, there's nudity, there's all these different things that hadn't really been seen in comics throughout the 70s and 80s because of the comic book code and all these different things, and Marvel and DC being the dominant comic book publishers. And even by the 90s you had DC creating their Vertigo imprint so that they could put out more interesting stuff like Sandman, where Neil Gaiman got his start, and stuff like that. So it was kind of this gateway comic when you view it as like this opening of the door to acknowledge that, like, okay, these kids that grew up in the 70s and 80s with comics, they're now teens and in their 20s, and they still like comics, and they want stage. They're ready for adult themes and things, and that's sort of, this is one of those comics that opened that door. So but like I said, I don't have a huge affinity for the graphic novel, though I am planning to reread it just for, I don't know, posterity's sake or whatever. I don't know. So one thing we'll get out there right away is the soundtrack. The reason I want to do that is because throughout this episode, you're going to notice we'll have little various breaks where I just play the soundtrack, and that's not going to be, let me go ahead and use a word that I'm going to use in this a few times: diegetic.
So normally,
yes. Ooh. Normally on this podcast, when I play music, it is diegetic, meaning it is occurring to us and to the audience. We the characters, if you will, we are the characters of this podcast. We hear it. It exists in our world, and you hear it as an audience member. So the sound that you will hear in this episode is not diegetic. We don't also hear it.
You just broke down that fourth wall.
I know, right?
You ripped that to shreds.
So it's just going to be little various music breaks where I'm going to play little 30-second snippets of my favorite songs from the soundtrack. So you'll notice that throughout the episode when there's a pause or in a part where I'm particularly rambly that I can edit out, it'll just be 30 seconds of Helmet or Pantera or something.
And everybody who's sat through our long-winded monologues is like, oh, thank God. They'll be able to edit themselves.
But so the soundtrack. The soundtrack was huge for this. It was, if you were the right age for this, which I was like 14, 15 years old when this came out. It came out in 94. Yeah, so I was like 13, 14, whatever. Perfect age for this. Like you were just far enough into grunge that and just far enough off of Cobain's death that you were just like, wow, when this came out. Mm-hmm. It was alternative, like the Stone Temple Pilots are on this, but it was also,
I thought I recognized them.
Yeah, the Big Empty, I think it's Big Empty, is on it. And but it also had all this metal and hardcore stuff and some some almost like techno stuff. One of the songs that I love the most off this is a song from a band called My Life with a Thrill Kill Cult.
I am the new way to go. I am the way of the future. I am the new way to go. I am the way of the future.
People being crucified.
Oh yeah, I remember the name. I couldn't tell you what this stuff sounds like.
Which is the song that diegetically appears in the movie during the big fight scene in the boardroom. The band is playing in the club downstairs, and the music spills over into the action scene and is diegetically in the movie.
Okay, you can stop now. You've used the word enough times. Yours.
Can I diegetically stop now?
What is it that they say? Use a word 5 times and it's yours. I think
yes,
you've done that.
I own it.
You're good.
So the soundtrack was great. 9 Inch Nails did a cover of Dead Souls, which I believe is Joy Division. There's a great Cure song. I feel like they re-recorded or changed some of the lyrics. This song, for those who have watched the movie, is also present in his like transformation scene where he puts his makeup on. It's the song that is in the background of that scene.
Now that I think about it, that is actually having Robert Smith and during that scene is a little bit on the nose.
With the eye makeup and everything.
Yeah.
So the soundtrack is amazing, and it was a huge thing for me. It introduced me to the current version of rock and metal, like the quote unquote alternative stuff that I wasn't hearing. Bands like Helmet that I had never heard of. Henry Rollins has a song on there. It's just top to bottom. It's stacked with this sort of like heavy, dark, gothy rock and metal. And it didn't leave my CD player for forever. I think I actually had a tape of this too, because at the time I had a tape player in my car. Mm-hmm. So I had a tape of it.
Accessible everywhere. Yeah,
exactly.
I remember that. Yeah.
So the soundtrack is just amazing. And most of it does appear diegetically.
Okay. Please stop. Please stop.
In the movie, like most of it is actually used as background because the movie also has a great score by Graham Revell, I think is his name. It's one of those things where it's like Graham, but it's spelled Grame or something. That's pronounced Graham, right?
I think so. Yeah.
When I was a kid, I always called him Gramey or something. Yeah. I don't know. But he also does a really amazing score in this. And I had a friend in 97, 98 in Raleigh, and someone had bought her the soundtrack because I think she saw the tape in my car. We worked together, so sometimes I would take her back and forth to work and stuff. And she saw the soundtrack in my car, and she was like, "Oh yeah, somebody got this for me." And I was like, "Oh yeah, cool, it's awesome, right?" And she's like, "No, I wanted the score because I thought that was really good. But they bought me the soundtrack instead. I'm like, oh, well, it's really good. I also like the score a lot too. But that did not then make her instantly fall in love with me.
Well,
And
what you needed to do was buy her the score.
I think I did. I did at some point.
I was going to say, like,
I was real sweet on that girl.
Come on, that's a gimme.
I was real sweet on that girl. She was a lot like you. That she was smart.
Okay.
And she was her own, independent woman. And, it was this sort of thing where I was just like, the cartoons where the eyes pop out, like whatever the version of that is when you meet someone who is just like, it's not about physical attractiveness. It's about everything else. You're just like, but it turns out that wasn't in the cards, but we were really good friends for like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And that was like super, like even better.
Yeah.
Because I eventually left Raleigh and like, then that would have been super complicated, but we kept in touch for like a year after, just like not Facebook, MySpace or whatever.
Oh, MySpace. Oh,
but yeah,
boy.
she was great. But you're great too. And I love you.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. If you're out there, you're a loss.
Yeah. Sorry, Bernadette. But the score is great. And I think it doesn't get enough attention because of the soundtrack being so well received and so popular amongst the kids.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, look up that score, check it out. It's got some really good, like the love theme and stuff is really good.
You know what I was thinking as you were saying this? At the time, one of the main music genres was alternative.
Quote alternative.
Is that a thing now, or is it just this big soupy? Like, I know, because I don't know. I don't listen to new music very much anymore. Yeah. I hear a song that's on an ad on TV, and I think, I like that. Let me look it up, and then it's been out for 2 years. But I know there's a whole lot more pop stuff than there used to be. Is there anything that's quote alternative anymore?
I think people got a lot more precious about music genres, and sort of they splintered all that stuff. Like even now, when you talk about certain bands that we considered quote alternative, people will be like, well, they were actually post-hardcore.
I don't even know what that means.
They were neo-punk. They were not alternative, quote unquote. So stuff like that. But I think the music that we would have called alternative now would just be called pop. Because that music became pop.
Yeah, I can see
but
that.
Yeah, I don't know as far as like, is there some music genre you would call alternative? Because things are so different now. Things aren't dependent on radio play and I don't know.
Well, and it used to be, I think, in the similar orbit as quote alternative was quote college music.
Yeah,
like
indie,
R.E.M.
sort of indie
and
music,
Dave Matthews and that kind of stuff. And I don't even know if that's a thing anymore.
Yeah,
because
no,
college, I don't imagine college radio stations are as big of tastemakers now.
Yeah, I'm not sure. But I mean, college music kind of became indie music when indie music even stopped meaning independent label.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had all these other genres that were birthed and morphed and split, and emo and, like I said, hardcore and post-hardcore and all this stuff. So
emo, what cracks me up about emo is that, I mean, the particular flavor of emo that got called emo was unique, but emo as just pale faces and heavy makeup and angst, like that just comes back every 5 or 10 years.
Just a version of goth.
I'm like, this is not all that unique.
Yeah. Emo is always a really, it's a bad subject for me to talk about because I started listening to that stuff. I started listening to a music genre which was called emo.
Yeah.
But that name was later usurped by Avenged Sevenfold and whiny hybrid metal bands and stuff, screamo and all this stuff.
It was culturally appropriated, and now
sort of. Yeah. I guess what we listened to and called emo largely is now called like Midwestern emo. It's stuff like from Omaha. It's like Cursive and Bright Eyes and all these bands that came out of the late 90s, and like Mineral and Jets to Brazil and all these bands that we called them emo. Like that was what we called the genre. And then someone was like playing something that was like borderline goth metal and calling it with the screaming singer and calling it emo. And I'm like, that's not emo. Is people who are dressed in regular clothes and sad about not having a girlfriend, and not fitting in at a college party.
Is corporate emo more like Fallout Boy?
I guess
that's
probably.
Well, he wears eyeliner and nail polish, so clearly.
Yeah, and I that was sort of the disconnect for me when it got weird, because when all of a sudden it became emo to dress in dark clothes and wear eyeliner and stuff. Because I was just sitting there going, this is just goth stuff. Like, what are you guys even doing? Like, I want my shoegazing, melodic 3 chords, and that's all you have on a whole album. Just dumb. People just doing the whatever not arpeggio. There's a word for it when you have a chord, but then you strum instead of strumming the whole chord, you play every note. Ding, 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 ding,
I have no idea.
Anyway, it was just a lot of that. It was a lot of.
So clearly we need to do a couple episodes on music, because this is you can tell me a whole lot of stuff. Like, I recognize all these band names that you're saying because I've seen them on your CDs, but I don't remember them. Anyway, okay.
This is a good sidetracky episode, but let's bear down, because we don't want to spend all day here.
We might. You the listener, don't. So.
So like I said, this movie was directed by Alex Proyas, I believe is how you pronounce it. I think as a kid I always said Proya, because I thought it was like AS, but it turns out he's like Australian or something. I don't know. I think his Middle Eastern might be his like culture of origin or whatever. But I've heard it since pronounced. And I love thinking back to like stupid me, who was like, I love that music by Graeme Revell and in this movie by Alex Proya. Like trying to be like, culturally sensitive and or cool, and just failing miserably. Alex,
I wouldn't know anything about that.
No.
I am effortlessly
cold
cool.
as ice. You walk around our house the whole day doing the ice water in the veins emote. There you go. Yes. That's you all day, every day with the kids. I've been introducing Marian as the younger, hipper part of our relationship. I've been introducing her to all the things you kids are doing out there on TikTok these days.
Oh my God.
So Alex went on to direct Dark City, which is a movie that will absolutely also be featured here.
Okay.
Alex is one of those rare directors that didn't do a whole lot more of note, but directed 2 of my favorite movies of all time. Mm-hmm. He went on to direct I, Robot with Will Smith.
Okay.
And also that I think his last major film where people were finally like, we're not giving you money for movies anymore. He did that Egypt Gods and Monsters movie with
Billy Zane?
No, not that one. It's got that Lannister in it from Jamie Lannister from whatever that guy's name is. Like he's in it, and I think Gerard Butler is in it. Jerry Butler. Jerry Butler's in it. And it was a total bomb, and it was just like this big sci-fi movie that just big special effects movie and CGI movie that just like everybody was just like, no, thank you.
Do not want. Okay.
I watched it and it was fine. Like, it was a popcorn movie. It was fine. But considering where this guy started his career with The Crow and then with Dark City, which was a wholly original concept that he was actually apparently working on when he got The Crow to direct, I can't believe this would be like if Tim Burton fell off the face of the map after his Batman movie, or after like Edward Scissorhands, like he made Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Edward Scissorhands, and then that was it. That was all he ever did. Then just continue to make movies, but no one cared, which is kind of what he's doing right now. But he at least had like 20 solid years where he actually made relevant things that were like, oh yeah. And then he was like, hey, what about Dark Shadows? Remember that TV show? What if I made that into a movie? And no one cared. But Alex, the cool thing about it, and you might notice this if you think back now to watching The Crow, he got his start in music videos.
Okay.
So
that tracks. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of this is very MTV. And I think that was one of the reasons that this movie hit big when it happened, is because it was so MTV, like quick cuts. And there are a couple of like 30 second to 1 minute music numbers in there. that he shoots like a music video. There are montages of things happening, running on rooftops, jumping off buildings, and it's all shot like a music video. It really does read like a 90-minute music video in a lot of cases.
Speaking of running on rooftops, I thought this was interesting. At some point they mention that they're in Detroit.
Yes.
Does not look like Detroit. It looks like London.
Yeah,
because I was feeling like in Mary Poppins when they're with the chimney sweeps and they're jumping from roof to roof and they're going over the ridge pole and all that stuff. I thought that was an interesting blurring of cityscapes. Yeah,
and actually that brings up the look of the city. I think I mentioned this to you, just like keep an eye out at the way the city looks. Mm-hmm. And yeah, this is one of the last few movies that used extensive models and miniatures, scale stuff. And I really like, it's noticeable with the city that stuff isn't quite to the right. It's all fine with scale, but it just, you put a large building next to something that you internally know the size of. It
makes it a little bit dreamy.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. It makes it kind of dreamlike. And and that's one of the things I love about it, because the fact that they use miniatures so extensively to shoot the city, it gave it this ethereal, like dreamlike quality. And then some of the stuff that they did, like the filmmaking techniques that they used here. First of all, this was a relatively low budget movie for it being a theatrical release of a hot comic book property at the time, I'm sure. So they had to do tricks. Like in the intro scene, they're swooping in through the city. You got the voiceover explaining about the crow, bringing someone back to the land of the living to set the wrong things right. And there are these plumes of fire shooting up out of these buildings as they're zooming through the city. Like, there's no way to CGI that in 1993. Like, you can't, like, the stuff was so rudimentary that you couldn't. So what they did is they put up pieces of glass in the model, and then they projected explosions and fire onto the glass.
Oh,
so that it was translucent.
Yeah.
And it was in the physical model to the right scale. And then they flew through the model with these cameras projecting these projectors projecting flames and explosions and stuff.
Interesting.
And just like the techniques that they use, like there's a chase scene, and I remember hearing an interview, or it might have been the director's commentary with Alex. He was like, "Yeah, we had like 100 feet of road.
Wow.
Like we had nothing.
Yeah.
We had we had a block or so like built on a backlot. So this movie was filmed in Wilmington."
Oh,
North Carolina.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
Yes.
Okay.
Really. And they have a backlot there that has like an intersection and a couple of blocks of street, but they only had like about one block or like a block and a half of continuous road that they could do chase scenes and stuff on. And so they had to basically, like, every time you see a chase scene, it's like a count of 3.
Yeah.
And then they have to cut. So they got around that by using models. Scale models and stuff. And I would challenge you to go back and point to any scene in that extensive car chase near the end of the movie and go, that was a model.
Yeah.
That was a model. Because the way it's cut and the way it's lit and shot, you really can't tell. And the thing that they really succeeded in is because, again, we're in the time when like color grading, which is what they do now to make all the shots in a movie have the same feel, like they were all shot with the same lighting or similar lighting. You know, if you shoot something under orangish light and then you shoot another scene under white light, and you don't really mean for that difference to happen, it just happened because of something on the day. You know, you regrade, you regrade to make the white one orange or the orange one whiter and stuff like that. And this is before all that. So the fact that they were able to take miniature shots and full-size in-person shots of the car chase and match the grading and get everything right, like it really sells it all. And even though at the time he wasn't an experienced filmmaker in terms of motion pictures, he had shot so many videos and stuff that he was that good at his craft at that point that he was able to do all that and just knock it all out of the park. And this is another one of those movies that goes on the short list of movies that was like instrumental in me wanting at some point to explore filmmaking as a career, because just the way things are shot, the angles, there's some distortion sometimes on the lens, like on purpose. that just makes things look good. Like the close up of the crow's eye is like a fish eye, and it just looks this movie has a look, and I really like movies that just have a look to them, a distinct look. It is, like you said, the city itself doesn't quite look like Detroit, real life Detroit. It doesn't even really quite feel like a real city. It's all very small and compact and on top of each other, and, you know, narrow streets, and it's always dirty. And there's this quality to the way it's shot. And he said this in interviews as well, that effectively he wanted to shoot the movie in black and white, but he effectively shot it in black and white by muting all the colors and just using flashes of oranges and reds as accent colors throughout the movie. But otherwise, it's desaturated, which they did chemically with the actual physical film that they shot on. It's desaturated and just has this look. And it just, as a time capsule of that sort of filmmaking, stuff that is now 3 clicks in After Effects that they had to do with costuming and set lighting and set design and the chemical processing of the physical film to get all these things to line up. It's just, it's an amazing time capsule for all that stuff.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm just talking about a lot of stuff. I don't know. Give me your opinion. We haven't really talked about what you thought about this movie. What did you think?
I liked it. I don't know what I expected.
Yeah.
Because I've been hearing about it for so long, and I don't know if I'd seen him in anything else. What else? He was in Enter the Dragon, right?
As a child. He was
there was he played his father.
I don't know if he did.
I thought he did.
You talking about Dragon, the Bruce Lee story? That's Jason Scott Lee.
Oh.
That's no relation.
Oh.
Just a different actor.
Okay. Well, I was looking, I was like, I don't think he would fit. Okay. So, well then I don't know what he was in at all.
He was in Rapid Fire, which is a generic action movie where he was the star. And he was in Showdown in Little Tokyo with Dolph Lundgren.
Okay. I don't think I know that either.
Yeah. And in both of these movies, I think he's playing Asian.
Yeah.
Which I wouldn't even call him Asian passing. Like he just looks 100% Caucasian to me. Obviously his heritage is what it is. I'm not saying he's not an Asian. He obviously is Bruce Lee's son. So, but yeah, he wasn't in a lot. Which is tragic. I mean, this is probably as good a time as any to talk about his death during the filming of this movie.
Yeah. So what was it, like a stunt gone wrong, or I have no idea?
Yeah. So there's all kinds of stories, and I'm not going to try to tell a definitive version of it, but essentially what happened is they were shooting the scene where a live Eric Draven gets killed, and they did a close up of Fun Boy. I think the actor's name is Michael Massey, holding his revolver, which is like everybody in this movie has like a sort of not everybody, but several of the characters have like a hero weapon that is theirs. Like Fun Boy has a revolver. Tintin used knives. Tony Todd's character, which I can't remember the name of his character, has this very specific, like, I don't know, it's like a MAC-10 or so. It's some kind of machine gun, like submachine gun.
Anyway.
So they all have these like hero weapons. So he's pointing the gun at the camera. Well, when you point a revolver at the camera, you can see the chambers. You know, if you think about a revolver, there are spots. There's the chambers where you can see that the bullets are in there.
I see where this is going.
Right, pretty much. So yes and no. So the standard thing to do in a movie then is to create these like plastic or brass caps that rest in the chamber that look like bullets but aren't bullets. You don't. There's no actual bullets in the gun.
Right.
You know, for those who don't know, when you shoot a gun in a movie, it's loaded with a blank that has way more powder than is needed so that you get an impressive muzzle flash. but that's it. Like if you can think of a bullet casing, the 90% of that bullet casing is the casing that holds the gunpowder and the ignition source and all that. And then just a little bit at the top, the little dome at the top is the bullet, quote unquote.
Okay.
So a piece of ordnance or whatever for a movie is not going to have that little round bullet top. It's just flat.
Okay.
And it's just packed with powder.
Okay.
To make a pop and a muzzle flash.
Okay.
So if you put those bullets into a revolver or have nothing in it, you will, especially if you have nothing, you will see straight through the holes in the revolver.
Sure.
In the chamber. So you got to cap it with something. And so they did, but the story that I heard was that that the shot was changed on the day. And so no one had prepped the caps for it, for the gun. So they really quickly rigged something up and they like glued it into the gun or something. And there's all kinds, like I said, there's all kinds of stuff. There's like a story that the actual proper arms guy wasn't there. And this was the prop master that did this. And he wasn't really authorized to work with the guns or that they never had a proper arms guy on set to maintain the guns. There's all sorts of stuff. There's all sorts of theories and stuff.
Isn't there something of an urban legend that the movie was cursed or something like that?
No, there's an urban legend that the Lee family is cursed.
Okay.
Because Bruce Lee died under mysterious circumstances.
Okay.
And then Brandon died under mysterious circumstances.
Okay.
Freak accident / mysterious circumstances.
Yeah. So essentially, it was supposed to be a fake bullet, but it was a real one.
Well, so they take the gun, they pop out the caps, and they load it with blanks. They go back to the shot, the reverse angle or whatever, however it is, so that you can't see there are no caps when they fire the gun. But of course, unbeknownst to them, part or the majority of one of the caps had broken because in the scene, again, this is all like just over the years you hear these things, and as a fan of the movie, you absorb them. In the scene, he cocks the gun, which causes the chamber, the barrel, the chamber to roll so that the next bullet is in line.
Yeah.
When you cock a revolver, the cylinder rolls to bring the next bullet in.
Sure.
So you had this cap, and they cocked the gun in the close up. It rolled, and then they pulled the gun out and unloaded it and all this stuff. And the cap essentially broke off in the chamber of the gun. And then when they loaded it with these extra powerful blanks and shot, it projected a bunch of shrapnel essentially into him.
Oh God.
And, it took him like a second to realize, because in the scene, he's supposed to walk in with like a bag of groceries, and the squib or whatever to get shot is in the bag of groceries.
Yeah.
So they shoot at him and the squib goes off, and then, he's acting on the ground.
Yeah.
And realizes something's wrong. And, it's like they cut and stuff.
Oh man. And
he took him to the hospital, and it was like 10 or 12 hours or something of surgery and stuff. And he just didn't make it. Apparently it was, the things you hear after the fact and all the different, the legal case that came from this that was just settled out of court, like Miramax or whoever the production company didn't even fight it. They were just like, how many millions of dollars do you want?
Yeah.
To the family. You hear things like that it was almost like a mini shotgun blast, or that it was worse than a bullet because it sent this stuff out at erratic angles.
Yeah. Well, and if it's shrapnel, it's sharp, so that's even more.
Or that it was, if it had been a real bullet, he probably would have survived, because it might not have even hit him, because they weren't. I don't think they were pointing. Like, I think that they angled it in such a way that he wasn't really pointing at him like dead center. He was pointing off to the side or something, but the angle makes it look like he's pointing at him. He shoots it. So if it was a real bullet, probably would have missed him. But because it just like came out in fragments and all that kind of stuff, and they couldn't find the fragments until the autopsy and all kinds of stuff. So it's just horrible and tragic.
God, that's terrible.
And because this movie, like, you just watched this movie, he would have been a star after this.
Yeah,
his performance is so complete and nuanced. He's funny when he's supposed to be funny. He's dramatic when he needs to be. He has just this great demeanor. Like he's just so like in the human scenes where in the pre-death scenes where he's with Shelley, his fiance, like it's effortless. Like they look happy together.
He would have been a good romantic lead.
Yeah, like you buy that they're in love.
Yeah. And he's easy on the eyes.
Yeah, no, he's a handsome man, and he's very well spoken. He has a, I think because he's this action star and he's the son of Bruce Lee and all this, it's one of those things where you're like surprised when he talks and he's articulate, but you can tell, like we watched the VHS interview.
Yeah, he seemed very thoughtful.
And extremely like in the know about his craft and his character motivations.
And articulate and good vocabulary and, not a himbo. And
And the reason I had you watch that is because there is a scene in that interview. Mostly it's just him talking about his character and how he's glad to have the role of the Crow, and it's filmed on the set. And there's a scene in that interview where he says basically like, how many times are we going to experience something in our life before we die? How many times are you going to watch the full moon rise? How many times do you remember a day in your childhood? Like 10, 20, who knows? We don't know when we're going to die. And that's what makes life so precious. And then like weeks later, he's dead. And that interview, it was on the end of the VHS tape that I had. And that interview was just so like, I remember after watching the VHS tape and the first couple times, I don't think I stayed for the interview. And then one time I did. And I was just like,
gut punch,
jaw dropped and and gut punched, just like, oh my God, he's sitting there saying how precious life is and how you shouldn't take anything for granted because you could die tomorrow. And he died tomorrow.
Oh gosh.
After this interview, like, oh my God.
So I noticed that there were lots of shots where you don't see his face, just his hair. Were those all afterward?
I don't want to say all, but a lot of them. So apparently there's a couple of aspects to the post-death filming. Some of it is reshoots and adding stuff, and then some of it is what a storyline that they eliminated, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I think wasn't filmed was the resurrection and putting on the Crow makeup. So if you notice those scenes, there are like definitely parts of the resurrection. He was there. But when he climbs up the ladder to go into the building, like he accesses their old house from the roof it's a multi-story, apartment building. He accesses the old house from the roof. You can start to see it then. There's a scene where he first walks into the hallway of the apartment building, and it's all first person as he's pushing the door open and doing these different things. Within that scene, I guess because they were like, it's too much first person, they have a scene where you briefly see him like walk around a corner and he's shivering. And that scene is directly taken from just moments earlier when he's walking to get the boots that the Crow leads him to. So he gets resurrected. The Crow leads him to those boots. Then he leads him back to his old house. The Crow is really like his guide.
Yeah. The Crow helps him find all the people that he's going to kill, et cetera, et cetera.
And the Crow is in the sort of rewritten version of the movie, the Crow is the source of his power. We'll talk about why that wasn't necessarily the case in the original script, but in a minute. But so it's that. It's a lot of that scene, the scene where Sarah, who is the young girl who Shelley and Eric had sort of adopted and were taken care of because her mom was a drugged out waitress, and she comes looking for Eric and finds him, and he reappears on the stairs in front of a window, and it's backlit, and you don't see him. That stuff. But mostly what I consider to be like one of the iconic scenes of the movie, which is when he's putting on the makeup and the Cure songs playing in the background. That whole thing, like that's pretty much none of that is him. There's even a scene where he punches a mirror, and then there's like a moment where you see him, and he's like, faux emotional. That is also the same reused cut of him walking and being cold in the rain. Excuse me. So they did a lot of that. One of the like really iconic trailer scenes was also in that same scene where he puts the makeup on. He walks towards the window, and he's standing in this beautiful circular window that they had in this loft apartment. Mm-hmm. And he kind of comes into focus and there's a lightning crash and you see his face half illuminated. That's not him. Several scenes like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not always, because I think the director made some very specific choices about only showing his feet or only showing him from behind. So I think there are scenes where it's 100% Brandon Lee, but you're only seeing his feet walking or his silhouette. And I think that was just kind of the style of the movie in a lot of ways. But yeah, those scenes in particular are the scenes where they're definitely post.
I did notice that, yeah, you didn't really see him while he was putting the makeup on. I thought it was just a choice of, a dramatic reveal.
Yeah, and it works.
Of his face,
it works.
But I
mean, I think it works really well. And
yeah,
like I said, that scene in particular, that whole the Cure song is called "Burn." That whole scene is just masterfully cut to that. There are moments in that, like when he pulls on this skin tight long sleeve shirt, and you see his hand like emerge through the sleeve, and he pulls it down over his like scarred up back and stuff. It's just beautiful. Just just some of the stuff they did in there is just, again, talk about the cinematography, talk about the way the movie shot. Like, that's some of it. And to know that a lot of that was because they just didn't have any other choice.
Yeah.
Choosing to just show these cutaways of parts of his body that end up being so effective because they couldn't do anything else.
Yeah. It's a little bit, you think about, I mean, you say, oh, he clearly would have been a star. We say that about James Dean too, but then part of it is that he died while he was young and beautiful. And would he, in fact, you don't know. But.
Yeah. Well, I think so with Brandon Lee, I think everybody was just waiting for that breakout role. Rapid Fire was a generic action movie. It was kind of his first chance to star in a movie. It was a generic action movie. It was fine, but it was 100% Brandon Lee, son of Bruce Lee, is going to be an action star, and here is his big action star vehicle for Rapid Fire. And I think this movie wouldn't have been as much son of Bruce Lee in the promotion. Obviously, the unspoken promotion for this movie became Brandon Lee's last film.
Yeah, he would have been allowed to be his own person if it was the first or second in a long line.
And that's the reason that I think this would have been his breakout movie, because again, all the other things we talked about, that he was given a chance to do more than just punch and kick, and kind of the stuff that his dad was never given a chance to do. Who knows? Bruce Lee could have been a great dramatic actor, but no one ever wanted Bruce Lee to do a complex character like this. They wanted Bruce Lee to be the guy who comes into the cafe and guys are roughing them up, and he has a 5-minute fight scene and, gets on the bad side of the local crime lord, and then they have a 45 minute, tower battle where he has to fight his way up to the top and all this bullcrap, which are great movies. Game of Death and Chinese Connection, all these movies, they're great movies.
I've never seen anything with Bruce Lee.
As action movies.
Some Bond ones? No,
I don't think
Batman, something.
No, he's in, he plays Kato in Green Hornet.
Okay.
That might be what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
He plays the sidekick in Green Hornet. But yeah, so as a result of his death, the movie was initially just going to be scrapped. And how much had they shot? How much they had left to do? Most of it. It was mostly done.
Yeah.
But they had, I think, to hear Alex tell it, the director, his thing was just, no, like, I can't do this. I can't go back to this. This is like, as special as this is to me, I can't do it.
The trauma for everybody involved.
Yeah, well, including think
the
about
actor who fired
Michael Massey, right?
Yeah,
who just went for like 20 years and never talked about it. He continued to act.
Yeah.
There's like a couple of interviews in recent years where he was just like, I don't talk about it. I don't talk about it because it's like such a personal thing. Like that happened. Accidents happen. It took him a long time to probably forgive himself.
Oh yeah.
Of course, not his fault. It's like 100% not his fault. But you can tell people that you're still the guy who shot somebody.
Yeah.
In a stupid movie. But what you hear is that Brandon Lee's family, especially Eliza, his fiance, wanted them to finish it. His mom and his fiance and his sister, I'm sure Shannon Lee, I think is her name, pushed them to finish it and gave them the blessing and was like, do it, please. This is because they all felt the same way. Like, this is too good. Like what you have is too good, and shows him in too good of a light. Well, yeah.
Better to have a final performance than just, I don't know, boxed up on a shelf somewhere.
Because you're taking it back in a certain way. Like this is the unreleased movie that no one will ever see because he died filming it, versus the triumphant release of the movie that would have done something for his career, whether it would have made him a bona fide star or whatever. You know, maybe the movie would have flown under the radar when it was released without that, you know, but yeah, either way, this is something that would have helped his career in a huge way and made more people realize that he isn't just the son of Bruce Lee, that like he's a good, legitimate actor. And like you said, well-spoken and all these things. But one thing I don't want to keep, we won't keep going on this too much longer. But one thing I did want to bring up, because I think it's super interesting, is that because of his death, they cut this plot line, and you'll hear different stories from the director about why they cut it. Initially, everybody was just like, well, they cut it because it's too morbid because of his death. I don't know if you noticed this. It took me a couple watches to notice, but throughout the movie, at various times, you start to see electrical tape on his costume. He's got it around his hands. He's got it around his abdomen.
I did see that. I thought it was something about he was patching his shirt after a bullet had gone through it or something like that.
Sort of. But you also will notice upon multiple rewatchings that he has a large slit in the back of his coat that he doesn't have. So he kills Tintin, who's the knife guy, and takes his coat. He has this long leather coat that he wears for the rest of the movie. And there's this big slit in it. It doesn't happen during the Tintin fight. It happens during a scene that was cut. So there was a character cut called the Skull Cowboy. And the Skull Cowboy is in the comics, but I don't know that he's in there to a huge extent. Effectively, he brings the crow. Like, he is sort of like, the whole movie is positioned a lot like a Western. You know, I don't know if you notice it, but like Top Dollar, as portrayed by Michael Wincott, is very much like my daddy used to say, and all this sort of in his
who, by the way, because the name Michael Wincott means nothing to me. Who do we know him better as?
He's the cousin of the sheriff of Nottingham?
Yes. Yeah. And Nottingham says, "I'm going to cut out your heart with a spoon."
But cousin, why spoon?
Because it's blunt, you idiot. It hurts more.
Yes,
yeah,
he's that guy.
That guy.
And also, like, if you're into the genre of action movies and or sci-fi horror, like, he's in a ton of stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, so he's very much positioned as a bad guy cowboy, like even down to his outfits. Like, I don't know if you noticed his outfits. They are amazing. He wears these vests and has these like puffy sleeves on his and he almost looks like if you mixed Jareth from the Labyrinth with a matador. And Jareth is already very Matador-esque.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking he had a little bit of a Dracula look about him. I guess because of the long hair and he's pale and he's very silky clothes. But
I could go with that.
I
could go with that. It's a bit of Dracula, but the whole movie is positioned as this sort of Western. He's coming into town to clean up.
Sure.
You know, Seven Samurai and all these movies, these Kurosawa movies are all like super referenced in American action cinema. So yeah, the Fistful of Dollars and Good, Bad, and Ugly and all this stuff, you know, just a good guy who is seemingly invincible coming to town to clean up and get justice, you know. So you have the Skull Cowboy, who I think they only filmed one of his scenes before they basically gave up on him. Before the end, before Brandon died. So the idea was he was more of an exposition for the audience.
Okay.
You know, he comes back to life. Eric comes back to life. The cowboy's there. The crow flies down from the cowboy's shoulder, and the cowboy basically like fills him in on what's going on. Stuff like that. So he is this character that is basically like gives him the rules. You know, he's the guy. He's the old man that tells him how. You know, he's the kid that tells him not to get the mogwai wet. You know,
yes.
He says, "You're here. You're invincible so long as you're on your mission. If you're not on your mission, you're vulnerable. You're not alive. Don't talk to these people that you knew in life. Don't get involved in their affairs.
Oh.
Don't try to save them. Don't try to help them. You have been given this power specifically to get revenge, and that's it.
When your list is done, you're done.
Right.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So because they cut that, they then have to cut the idea that he can become vulnerable when he's not on his mission.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the scenes in which he becomes vulnerable is the scene where he fights with Funboy, which has one of my all-time favorite jokes of all time, which even you laughed at, you Catholic.
I can't remember now. I'm sure I laughed.
You can't remember the joke?
No.
The Jesus joke?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Jesus Christ comes into
Can you put me up for the night?
Can you put me up for the night?
Yeah.
Hands the innkeeper 3 nails and asks,
Sure.
Can you put me up for the night?
Sure.
So he bests Funboy. He gets him to pass out from getting shot in the leg, throws him in the bathtub. And then Sarah, again, this adoptive sort of semi-daughter of theirs, her mom is Funboy's girlfriend. And he grabs her and he says something like, mother is the name for God on the lips and hearts of all children. And then he makes the heroin come out of her veins, like right out of her track marks.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, your daughter's on the streets. Go to her.
Yeah.
And that is not allowed under the rules, right? He not only did he interact with her, he used his powers to, to send her to rehab.
Interesting. Okay.
And so,
do you think that lasts, by the way? Because then the next morning she's up playing Mother.
Well, it doesn't
Mary Sunshine.
last because we find that out in The Crow 2.
Okay.
Which is not a good movie. And basically in The Crow 2, Sarah is older and now she lives in Los Angeles and she just happens to be around when a second crow is right, and she acts as his guide.
Okay. And her mother is back on the sauce.
Well, her mother's not featured, I think, but you get the idea that it didn't go well. It didn't last, and now she's out on her own. She's an adult.
Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway,
then they cut. He says all that to her. Then they cut to Draven, and he picks up one of Funboy's heroin needles, and he kind of looks at it. Well, that scene they cut. That scene continues with Funboy coming out of the bathtub that he's been thrown in he's trying to wake him up. He's running cold water on him, trying to wake him up in the bathtub. Funboy comes out of the bathtub, picks up the razor that Darla had tried to defend herself with, and slashes him on the back, cutting his coat and giving him a wound on his back. And he feels it.
Yeah.
It hurts him. And he gets cut a little bit more. They have a scuffle, and then he ends up turning
him into a pincushion.
with heroin needles. And that was all shot, and you can find that's on the Blu-ray. But you got to cut that scene because because if you don't explain why he can get hurt, then it doesn't make any sense. So throughout the movie, when he interacts with different people and does different things that wouldn't be specifically on his mission, he can expose himself, and that's why he has the tape on his costume.
Okay.
So they had to basically cut that whole scene, including, and that then changed the end of the movie because in the end of the movie, he loses his powers because within the continuity of the movie that we have, the crow, the actual physical crow, gets shot and wounded, and he loses his powers. But in the cut of the movie that would have existed if they had filmed everything in the script, when he goes into the church, so at the climax, Top Dollar, Michael Wincott, kidnaps Sarah, the little girl, because he wants the power. So Top Dollar, we didn't talk about, has this freaky sister who is like a voodoo lady, or not voodoo, but like a mystical lady.
Quote sister.
Quote sister. Well, that's supposed to be a sister? My father's daughter. And they are all like incestuous and all this stuff too. So, she cuts out people's eyes because the eyes are the power of the soul or whatever, blah, blah. She cuts out this, lady's eyes early in the movie. And he smokes her eye. She like puts the eye in a goblet and puts some stuff in there and then sets it on fire. And then Top Dollar like wafts it in and then blows it out the side of his mouth. Yeah. He literally, he gets high on eye smoke. So now they've got to do some inserts, and I think they did like a little reshoot of them in the car, Top Dollar and Tony Todd's character and Bai Ling, who plays his sister, and she says, "The crow is powerful, but it's power you can take." and has a feather. And I think that kind of sets up, but they do shoot the crow, and they were always going to shoot the crow apparently to try to depower him. But when he goes in to save Sarah, the Skull Cowboy stops him and he says, if you go in, that's it. Yeah. And if you die doing this, then it ain't gonna be good for you. Like you're not going to be with Sarah, or you're not going to be with Shelley. This isn't going to be good because you're not here to help the living.
Yeah. You're off track now.
Right. So he goes in and he is depowered, not because the crow gets shot, but because he is disobeying the laws of crowdom.
Interesting.
And of course, they, by eliminating all that, they really simplify. Honestly, it's a simplification. Like I would love, and for years wanted to see the Skull Cowboy cut of the movie, of course, only to find out later that only one scene exists. And I think that is the scene where he goes in to the church and the Skull Cowboy tells him, because of course movies are filmed out of order and all that stuff. And that was like the first scene they filmed. But then there's various stuff like the director said he wasn't satisfied with the costume for the cowboy. And then like that is one step too far I think for a lot of people would be one step too far into the fantastical, like guy who, cause you can buy this like sort of vaguely, like, I don't want to say Native American, but this like mysticism of like, oh, the crow takes your spirit to the land of the dead and it brings it back. And like, you can kind of like get on board with that. But then when you're like, oh, and there's a dead cowboy who explains the rules to you and pops up at various times to keep you on track, then you're like, you had me at Magic Crow, but now you're like undead cowboy. And I'm like, I don't know about this.
I don't know. I'm kind of credulous. I'll take whatever story you give me, but
yeah, but I think, I think it worked out in the end.
Well,
but yeah, so that was the thing.
My favorite thing about that church scene is when Bai Ling has the crow and she's about to kill it, and the crow pecks her eyes out. That was flipping amazing.
Oh, it was great. It was great.
Just what she deserved. It was
absolutely
glorious.
Absolutely. But yeah, the Skull Cowboy. So the Skull Cowboy, that thing actually, in like, I want to say like 95, like you may not remember this. I remember this because I was a computer nerd for my whole life, pretty much, from the age of 12 or something. You remember when multimedia CDs were a thing? Where you'd get these like, it was like all shockwave menu driven things, and you'd get like squirrel nut zippers, like Hot, I think. That one, the one with Hot, with the one with
I have that upstairs somewhere.
You put that in your computer, right? You put that in your computer, and it launches a whole multimedia thing.
Vaguely.
That was a thing in the 90s. Oh, hey, get our music CD. Like Primus did that with theirs. And it's got cool stuff on it, and it's all like 1 3-minute quick time that takes up or 500 megs.
You can download a screensaver or something.
Yeah. Oh yeah, stuff like that. And get the lyrics to the song. So there was a multimedia CD released for The Crow, and it had all of the unused footage, like the Fun Boy extended fight, the Skull Cowboy. It had all kinds of drawings, like production drawings and all this stuff. And I wanted it so bad. And I went to CompUSA one time, and they had it. And I was so poor at this time. This was like 97. I was just out on my own. And I think even by 97, it was kind of rare. They had it, and it was like $20, and I was just out on my own and super poor, going to school. And I went to the ATM and checked my balance, and I was like $3 short of being able to buy it.
Oh my gosh, that hurts.
So
that stings.
I came back on payday and it was gone.
Oh.
And I never got, like, I would find it on eBay for like $100.
Yeah.
People really quickly realized after it was discontinued, like they really quickly realized it was worth some money. And, and now you can get all that stuff on the Blu-ray, and it's great. And, I got to experience it all.
Oh, so you have it. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, when I got the Bluray for this, it had all the production stills and stuff
mental
on it.
note, birthday present.
Yeah.
But
if you could find that, that would be great. I would love that old Crow multimedia CD. But yeah, I think before we go, the only thing I think we really need to talk about is I feel like we have to acknowledge the cast of the movie. We already talked a little bit about Bai Ling and Michael Wincott, but one of our reoccurring favorites on this show is in this.
Oh my gosh. Has he ever played a good guy?
I don't know if David Patrick Kelly has ever played a good guy.
Gosh.
He has some great lines in this too. Like I feel like the lines in this, like they're not quotable, but the way that the lines are written in this movie, they feel quotable.
It's got some snap to it.
Yeah, just the way that they speak. Like there's a point where Top Dollar, or T-Bird, sorry, who's played by David Patrick Kelly, sends Skank. I don't remember the actor who played Skank, but he does an amazing job. Skank is this like speed freak. Each of the guys.
That was a good line. We ought to videotape this and play it back in slow motion. Right, I feel like I got to file that away.
Top Dollar says, yeah, because Skank is like, he's describing the scene. Actually, the scene that I like. There's a scene where they're the last two that's left. T-Bird and Skank, Fun Boy and Tintin have already been killed by Eric Draven, and T-Bird says, "Smokes and road beers," like. Just the way he says it, just like it's just a thing. Like, it's just a normal thing to send someone into the like, we're going to be driving somewhere. So of course we need road beers, like smokes and road beers.
It's a whole different class than beer that you drink for sipping. Like,
exactly. It's like, road beers is like Miller Lite, like whatever. I just need something. So yeah, Skank is recounting this scene when he's the last one left. He's recounting this to Top Dollar, and he's going like a million miles. Hey, T-Bird, go here and get some road beers. Yeah. And this ghost's gonna kill my ass next. And he's all over the place. Yeah. And Top Dollar maybe we should just record this and play it back. It just got a great, like, this, the way the lines are just like, there's the line, one of the characters that we didn't mention, and I forget this actor's name. It's like Joe Paula something, but Gideon he's this scummy pawn dealer.
Yeah.
Who basically enables these four criminals by taking all the stuff that they sell him the stuff, and he sells it in his pawn shop. And Eric goes there to get information about where the rest of them are, because the Crow tracks down Tintin in an alleyway, but he doesn't really know who else. Like, he doesn't know their names. He doesn't know the rest of them. So
the Crow's like, you got to do this part. Yeah, I can't give you everything.
Like, my wings are tired. All right, give me a break here. And so he goes to Gideon's because he knows that Tintin just left these names. Tintin just left Gideon's, and he's talking to Gideon, whatever, and he does the thing you talked about where he does the gently rapping at my chamber door.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm looking for something in an engagement ring. And Gideon goes, you're looking for a coroner, shit for brains. And he shoots.
Yeah.
And it's just like, there's great lines like that. Like the Hispanic detective who's always breaking Albrecht's balls.
Yeah.
He's the dumb detective who's always a step behind.
Yeah.
He asks him about T-Bird getting killed. And Albrecht goes, oh, looks like he zigged when he should have zagged. And the guy goes, bull fucking shit. Just the way he delivers the line is great. And the movie's just full of that stuff, including after the pawn shop scene where Draven blows up the pawn shop. Albrecht stops him and he says, don't move or whatever. And he says, I thought the police always said freeze. He said, well, I'm the police and I say don't move. If you move, sunshine, you're dead. And he goes, I'm dead. I say I'm dead. Moving. And I move. Yeah. And he moves. And
it's very fluid.
And that's right out of the comic. That entire scene is right out of the comic, including he bows to Albrecht, like he bows into his gun. That's right out of the comic. Funny. Even the perspective on the shot is right out of the comic.
It's all very smooth and fluid and snappy, and it feels very natural.
Yeah, and there are times when it veers into action movie cheesy, like when he kills Tintin, he throws a knife at him and sticks him in the shoulder, and then he runs up on him and pulls up one of his other knives out, and he goes, victims, aren't we all? And then stabs him. That one's like, even now, like when I was a kid, I was like, yeah. And now I'm like, okay.
Well, and you would kind of expect there to be a lot more angst and, eye rolling and, but like, it's for a movie about a guy getting revenge for his and his fiance's death. It's not really all that moody.
So there's a reason for that.
Okay.
Because in the comic, it is. Large portions of the comic are dedicated to him lamenting his lost love and writing and reading poetry and just sitting alone in that house with the cat, in their apartment with the cat, and just like being a sad boy.
You should see my face right now.
Yeah. Ugh. So that, like, I agree that it could have been more.
Little of that goes a long way.
But right. Like, there are a few scenes. There's a scene where he's sitting and he's burning old pictures, and different stuff, like when he's about to do the final, go after the final guy, Skank. And there's some time, there's a lot of flashbacks and there's a lot of stuff where he, like you get it. But in the comic book,
we don't wallow.
There are panels where it's just like a drawing of him sitting on a bed and 6 paragraphs of poetry that he's reading aloud or whatever. There's a lot of it. And so the stuff that was cut, I think they could have left a little more in, but the stuff that was cut, I think was cut with smartly because cuts. He needs to be a sad boy, but not like the sad boy, like the saddest boy
not
ever.
Debilitatingly sad.
But so I'm trying to think, some of the actors you've seen and stuff, but wouldn't know. Like there
were a lot of familiar faces, although I kept thinking that T-Bird, I guess. No.
That's David Patrick Kelly.
Fun Boy, I guess. Yeah. I kept thinking that was Buffalo Bill
right,
from Silence of the Lambs. He's got that grizzled
he
look
100% looks, and it doesn't help that he's like very sort of he's kind of long torsoed like that actor is, especially in the scene where he's dancing in Silence of the Lambs. He's very like long torsoed and like really skinny, but also kind of muscular. And he has like the dirty blonde long hair. And he's also
similarly just kind of gross.
Yes, very. Yeah. Fun Boy is the joker. He's like the joking guy. Like he tells jokes. Yeah. And that's why in the scene where he kills him, he tells him the Jesus joke.
Okay.
There's a great scene where he's in there with Gideon and he's asking about Tintin's partners, and he's like, "Oh, Fun Boy and this and that," and he's like, "It's a jolly pirate clan with jolly pirate nicknames." And he's smashing cases in between this, and that's just like there's a couple of in the movie. There's a couple of times where people are like, who are these? Why do these guys have these funny? Like, geez, like what's going on?
Well, I gotta say, like when you end up with the nickname Skank. It's kind of like in what is it, in Reservoir Dogs? Aren't they talking about who has to be Mr. Pink?
Mr. Pink,
don't let them nickname you Skank. That's not a.
But he 100% is a skank.
Sure,
like,
but
there's nothing about that guy that says like you couldn't nickname him anything tough sounding.
No,
because that guy he's 100. Like you could call him Speedball or something like that, but
just gutter snot.
Some crap.
Can I? Okay, one thing for me. At the beginning, you said, "Hey, this has a sexual assault. Are you going to be okay with that?" And I was like, "Sure, yes." So, and I think there's even at the beginning on the warning from the provider, there's like, sexual, blah, blah, blah. I'm not, triggered by that in the way that it reminds me of unpleasant experiences or anything like that. But like, come on, was that really necessary? I think you could, we beat her and she died of that. Like, I don't want to think about someone being raped so bad they died. That's just bad. And it's similar to when we talked about Highlander.
Yes.
I just don't love rape used as a plot device. And
you're right.
Sometimes it is an important part of a story. But I don't love it because that men wrote these scripts.
Sure.
Can we not have that as just I don't know. I don't like it.
And it's you
could have done it without that. But
1,000%.
Anyway.
Like I defended the Highlander thing a little bit because I did feel like it ended up giving that character an arc or something of an arc. But in general, there's no defending it. And even then when I was defending that, I was only defending it as a devil's advocate. Like there's no place for it. There's no place for something like that to be used just to sweeten the pot, it's just some sprinkles on top of the sundae. Like, it was already bad enough. Like, it's already a chocolate fudge sundae. Like, putting some sugar on top of that is not the thing that's going to make it. Like, he was killed. And like, for instance, in the second movie, that crow it's him and his son, and they're like tied to a cinder block and tossed in the lake. Okay, like that's enough. Yeah. Like you killed the person that I love the most in this world. That is motivation enough. And you there was no justice for it, and there never will be. Yeah. That is motivation enough. It is absolutely not needed. It wasn't needed in the source material. It wasn't needed. They didn't need to bring it over into the movie.
Well, and I also don't love this thought process that raping a woman is something that you do to her partner.
Yes.
Like you damaged his property. Like, no, that's good. Yeah.
I'm 100% with you.
I have seen movies, TV shows, books, whatever, where rape is part of the plot, and it is I get it. It makes sense. but this, like, that's
no, yeah, it's uncalled for, and it is.
But I will say it's not gratuitous. It's not.
It's not.
It's all like, if you didn't know that was happening, I don't like. I think there's a line or two that indicates, but
yeah, they do say it a couple times. But yeah, it's not. And I think people have gotten so much better about that it's not something that you should. It's just, it's the same as if you just had a person who was already bad and already a killer and an arsonist and all these things and said, oh, also he molests a child. And then you show like some graphic allusion to him molesting a child. Like,
we can just,
I didn't need that to already want this guy dead.
I hated him already.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's lazy and it's uncalled for. And like you said, it is it is about damaging the male of the pair and not the female. And I mean, I think right or wrong, that might have some historical accuracy to it, but is still, that doesn't matter. Like, there are a lot of things that are historically accurate that we can safely leave behind.
Well, and I think there's a way for a man to feel angry about his partner's rape that is not about his property.
Yes.
But I feel like when it is a plot device, it is often, let's hurt him by hurting her, which is just kind of, anyway.
Yeah. 100%. Anyway. But yeah, The Crow. So
that's my only dissenting.
I'm trying to think. Is there anything I would be sad not to mention? It's a great movie. Watch it. It's it does hold up, I would say, to my remembering.
Yeah. When was the last time you saw it before this?
Probably 5-6 years ago. It's the sort of movie where if I see it on, I will watch it.
Yeah.
I'll just watch it. Even if it's on television. And it contains one of my favorite television edits. There is a scene. So this is right up there with Yippee-Ki-Yay, Mr. Falcon.
Yeah.
Which is how they edit Die Hard. If you don't know, when he says Yippee-Ki-Yay, motherfuckers, they edit that on television to Yippee-Ki-Yay, Mr. Falcon.
Yeah, and that is famous to the point that you can get that on a T-shirt. I think, which is my favorite part of it.
So UPN did run this. My local UPN. I don't know if it was UPN the network. For those of you who don't know, UPN was a network, the Universal Paramount Network.
It was before the CW.
There was the WB network and UPN. I think merged
and they combined to form the CW.
No, yeah. Anyway, so they edited this movie, and like I said, I don't know if it was the local channel. But somebody made a television edit of this movie. And I don't know how you do that, having watched this movie again today. But the edit that they had, there's a point where he comes in to kill Funboy, and he first sends the Crow in. And Darla, who is Funboy's girlfriend, says, there's a big fucking bird over there. And, they're both high. So, it's like she's not even sure if he's hallucinating or not.
There's a big fucking bird.
There's a big fucking bird over there. So the television edit to that is, there's a big funky bird over there. It's a big funky bird over there. And
you hear funky bird, you think like a parrot, right, or a cockatoo, or a peacock.
Big Bird is a big funky bird, right? Like
not a big raven.
So that has always stuck with me. But like I said, I'll watch this movie anytime. But yeah, it's been a while. One of the phrases that I heard on a podcast that does retro video games, and I actually was going to do a podcast with a friend of mine using this name. But Watch Out for Fireballs is the podcast. And one of the hosts mentioned offhand the concept of being burdened by nostalgia. And I thought that was such a great phrase. And I fully went into like production on a podcast called Burdened by Nostalgia, for which the idea was you rewatched things that you hadn't watched in many years, but before you watched them, you got together and recorded your rememberings of them, and then watched them, and then got back together and
did it match up? Which we've experienced with a couple of these. I remember that as being much better.
Some of that concept exists now in this podcast.
Yeah.
But so many times I am burdened by my nostalgia. It is that I have such fond memories attached to this, or it's such a time and place, and that I can never separate my nostalgia from the movie itself and the quality of it. I feel like this is one where I'm not burdened by nostalgia. Like it would be really easy to be burdened by nostalgia on this one, to be so attached to this time and place, this, point in my life where I wanted to be like, I literally like 14 or 15, like I would walk around the house reenacting scenes from this movie when I was at home by myself. Like that's how much this movie was like, and how much of a dork I was. Can you imagine? Like,
I love this so much.
It is amazing. Like I remember one time I put this movie on and I fully reenacted while it was playing the putting on the makeup scene, the whole thing. Like I had a little shirt that I put on I did the whole thing. I wish I'd filmed it or something because it would be amazing.
This so much.
So that's, but I'm saying like that is how much I love this movie, and it would be so easy to like rose-colored glasses.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it holds up as an action movie. It holds up as a piece of filmmaking. Yes, some of the special effects are a little bit dated. You can definitely see some times where you're like, okay, that was a green screen.
The part like when the holes in his hand heal and stuff.
Yeah, that stuff is questionable.
That's minor.
But again, this was not only a time, a 1994 movie. It was a lower budget movie. It was like a few $1 million. Like it was not even akin to a period or the same period action movie. Like a Terminator 2 came out not too far from this movie. Like not before this. So like it was not even close to anything.
But it's fair. You say it was a 1994 movie. It feels like 1994. Little things like, the undercut on the girl and the music and all the people at the band show. And
that first time they show the club, I think that band is called Medicine. They have a female lead singer, and she is just, and she's dressed in the 90s.
Sounded like the 90s.
Yeah, she's got little dreadlocks, and she's wearing like a corset thing, and like fishnets and combat boots, and it's such a I mean, parts of it are not time locked. Like I think there are parts of this movie you could do an edit of this movie and then ask somebody what year is it, and they would be like anywhere from 1975 to 2010.
There is a lot that's fairly timeless, which I actually was reading something about period pieces the other day, and it said the key to a really good period piece is not everything is peak of that year, because newsflash, people keep cars and clothes and furniture longer. Yes. So, they're going to, so in a way that is a testament to it really is of 1994, because there's it doesn't scream, look at how 1994 we are. There's just enough, which is a nice
It's
blend.
not Singles or Clueless or one of these movies that very much puts itself into its time and place. It's not one of those. But Albrecht, Ernie Hudson's character, drives like a 1984 like Ford boat, and T-Bird has like a mid 80s Thunderbird.
God, and somebody has a Yugo.
Oh,
and that was the best.
That does date it though, because like that's a point when that was still a joke, and because like the 6'5" guy gets out of the Yugo to make it even funnier.
My comment was there ever a time when a Yugo wasn't a joke?
No, 100%.
Was it ever a good car? I don't.
No. The moment it was released, it was a joke. It was a joke. A punchline.
I always felt like good Yugoslavia, good for you for having a car. Like you go. I don't want to drive it, but good for you. You've got spunk.
And there's a joke in there where he he tries to roll down the window because it's smashed, because Skank, we're talking about Skank. Skank gets hit by this Yugo, and the guy gets out of the Yugo, and he's like I said, he's like 6'5", and he's like, "You ass hair, you hit my car," and he starts trying to beat him up because he just ran over Skank, and busted his windshield, and Skank, punches him in the nuts and steals his car. And Skank's driving, and the windshield's broken, of course, because Skank rolled up on it when he got hit by the car. He's trying to roll the window down, and the manual window. If you've never seen anything other than, there used to be a
that's why we say roll the window down.
Yeah, you roll the handle, it pops off, and he goes, "Goddamn 4 cars." Like that is such a 80s 90s joke. Yes. But other than that, it could be very timeless. There's it's just
I think this is a good watch. This is nostalgic if you are of that time period, like Gen X / old millennial, and it's just a good watch if you're of any other age.
Oh yeah. So your verdict is it's not torture.
No. I liked it, and I've been hearing about it for what now? Gosh, 30. Yeah, going on 30 years. Yeah. Oh my God, that's terrifying to say.
Yes.
But now I've finally seen it, so yeah.
Now you have.
Yay.
Yeah. So I mean, there's so much more. I mean, I could talk for another hour on this movie, just because, like I said, if Raised in Arizona is one of my top 3, this one's definitely number 4, number 5 on my list of most watched and most enjoyed movies and most loved movies of all times. Like I think, we'll get to some more on the list pretty soon, but and also we'll get to Dark City, which is the director's next movie after this. which takes a lot of the feel of this movie. Like I think he even says he borrowed a lot of his concepts for Dark City to kind of build the city of this movie, and to sort of make it a character itself. You know. Real quick before we go, do you love the something? You know, do this, do ? Profit. Like you, the gnomes, the Underpants Gnomes, steal underpants ? Profit. You love that. The thing that I noticed so much about this is Top Dollar, who is again Michael Wincott's character. He is the big crime boss of this city. He created this night, Devil's Night, which is the night before Halloween, where they set all these fires. Which
I think is there is a real thing called Devil's Night. Sure. It's not that, but and I think it is very regional. It may actually be in
a Detroit thing
in Michigan. Yeah. I've never. It comes up on one of those, you know. Where is your dialect from?
Yeah, like if you say Devil's Night,
do you call them lightning bugs or fireflies? Do you know what Devil's Night is? That's one of those things.
Yeah.
But anyway,
so somehow his entire criminal organization
set buildings on fire.
Is
profit.
Right? Is set buildings on fire. Something profit. Like somehow his entire he has built effectively. So he's lamenting in the movie that like it's become mainstream. Like I was so successful at I set the first fires in the city, and now to resist the system, and now Devil's Night has become the system.
It's so commercial.
He even says they have Devil's Night greeting cards. Ain't that precious? You know, like, but then that idea too, that they're like, hey, here's my Devil's Night greeting card. I hope your house doesn't get burned down by the criminal mobs that roams. And his new plan to make, quote, them all rich. And because he's pulling every stereotypical crime boss of the city. He's got the Asian gang, and he's got
a fat Southern guy.
He's got a militia guy with a beret on. Like somehow Detroit has all of these like, and this is probably intentional. All of these warriors like gangs that are just like, well, I'm looking for the baseball Furies guy. Like, where's the guy? There's just a quick shot of a guy in a baseball uniform, and he's like one of the crime bosses. Like, because again, David Patrick Kelly is in this movie. He was in, so his new plan to, quote, again, make them all rich is to basically burn the whole city down. Let's not waste our time with these a few fires where we just burn some businesses,
big bonfire.
Yeah, that won't, I guess, pay us protection money. So we're going to burn the whole city down and somehow, ? Profit.
Well, I wondered if it was because, you know, originally they're roughing this couple up because she was making noise about evictions and probably rent and things like that. And I wonder if it's something like burn down residential buildings to keep housing stock low so you can charge more rent. But I may be putting more thought into it than anybody has.
It could be like a forced gentrification thing. Yeah. Like that's sort of part of the plot of RoboCop. That like we are trying to so poorly police these neighborhoods that everybody leaves so we can buy this land at really low prices and then build fancy houses on them. Mm-hmm. Is it something like that? Is it like he's trying to burn everything down and then buy it all at a really low cost and then sell it to the yuppies that are bound to come looking for cheap land? I don't know.
Put in a restaurant that's better than Olive Garden.
Right. Yeah. There you go.
Sorry. Somebody was complaining about there being an Olive Garden put in near us. Yes. Like we wanted a higher end restaurant.
Cabarrus?
The one with the trees on the roof. Carrabba's.
The one that looks like it could sink into the ground.
I forgot all about that.
There was one in Greensboro, North Carolina, where we lived that didn't last real long. But yeah, it had dirt and trees, like soil and trees all over the roof. And it looked like it could sink down into the ground disguise itself.
That's how it becomes exclusive. People want to go to Carrabba's and the restaurant says, "You are not fit to eat a Carrabba's," and it hides in the crowd. Anyway.
I don't know why we have German accents at Carrabba's, but we do. You're not allowed to eat here.
We are a little punchy. Sorry.
Yes. It's weirdly hot in here. I'm sweating. Yeah. Burn the whole city down, ? Profit. Yeah. And again, I don't know how any of his business works. I'm assuming it's all built around extortion, protection money, extorting protection money.
Eventually, he's going to take somebody's heart out with a spoon.
No, he's going to marvel at someone else doing that. Right. And also just the final thing I'll mention is when I was younger, I always thought this movie had the lamest ending. He beats the final bad guy. Mm-hmm. Of course, Top Dollar reveals during he kidnaps Sarah to steal the power of the crow, and it all ends with this cathedral top, church top sword fight between the Crow and Top Dollar. And he reveals to him after basically defeating him. He's like, "You have put a smile on my face." He's like, "My daddy always said." He's happy, you know, he's like, "You made me smile for once. Like I've been just in a funk and here you came and now I'm happy again. Because you tried to kill me and destroy everything that I love." And he's about to kill him. He's about to kill the Crow and Draven. And he's just like, "Oh, I've got something for you." Yeah. Before Top Dollar says, "Just so you know, nothing happens in this city without my approval. I approved what happened to you and your girlfriend. Sorry about that. I'm sure I ruined your wedding or whatever, but nothing happens without my say-so. I am the real big bad here. I did that," which I presume gives Eric his powers back. Oh, because then he beats the big bad by saying, "I have something to give you. I don't need it anymore. Here you go." And he touches his face and he transfers Officer Albrecht's memories of staying with Sarah or staying with Shelley in the hospital for 30 hours while they tried to save her, but she died. He transfers all of that pain that Shelley felt for 30 hours.
That was a little fiddly.
Into Top Dollar all at once. And then he falls on a gargoyle and gets impaled, not just through the chest, but through the mouth.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And apparently they had a much more graphic version of that they had to basically cut almost completely to get an R rating.
That was quite enough. I got the picture.
They were like, "We had this awesome Michael Wincott dummy and we just dropped it on these spikes. It was, full of red ooze and we just dropped it on these spikes." So I always thought it was lame. Like, oh, great. Like, you can't just like shoot him or stab him or something. But now as I'm older, it feels like this sort of poetic cosmic justice, that the thing that is eventually Top Dollar's undoing is the pain that he has caused to people around, the people in the city around him.
It reminded me of, there's a passage from, it's a book in the Anne of Green Gables series, but it's set during World War I. Mm-hmm. And there are a bunch of school children talking about how, and it's on the home front in Canada, and there are a bunch of school children talking about how terrible the Kaiser is and what they would do to him if they caught him, and they would poke him with sticks and, blah, 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 like they're kids. So their revenge fantasies are small.
Not fleshed out.
And one of the kids says, "What I would do to him is I would make him good." And somebody says, "Why?" And he says, "Because when he's good, he would realize how terrible the things that he's done are, and then he would feel bad forever." Mm-hmm. Which you're kind of like, "Oh my God, kid, that is dark. Yeah. You are creepy."
And no one ever bullied that kid ever again.
Right. And the kid is like very solemn and like too adult for his, anyway. But I think of that often when somebody dies who is, just generally not a good person. Mm-hmm. Like, did they ever realize what pain they had caused? And that is really that's the best that you could hope for as far as revenge, for someone to really, if not regret the things that they had done, at least feel the impact of them.
Yeah. So, and it is poetic justice in the same way that when his sister dies by getting her eyes pecked out, because she was obsessed with taking people's lives. So nice And like I said, I really did have a problem with it when I was a kid, like, because I wanted an action set piece. I wanted him, like, he ends up falling on a gargoyle, which is great. Which is great. But I wanted I wanted him to get bested on a different level, but I can appreciate it now a lot more. So so you guys thought we were getting good at staying right around an hour.
Not so much.
Man, you're not here at this point. I know to listen to this, but
did we go for longer than the runtime in the movie?
In about 45 seconds.
Oh, man. We
will eclipse the runtime of the movie.
Okay. Well, all right, folks, listen, we would love to know what you think about this movie. So let us know. Do you have memories of it? If you watched it when it came out, does it hold up? Let us know.
Did you reenact scenes of The Crow in your living room?
Yes.
When your mom wasn't home.
Right. Oh, your mom wasn't home? Okay. I was going to ask her what she thought of it.
No, she wasn't. You think I did that like as a performance? Like, hey, mom, watch. I'm going to reenact The Crow.
I mean, she would sit there and watch it and applaud you.
I'm sure she would. She would have like, "Oh, that's the best. That's great."
Anyway, so we would love to know what you think. So drop us a line. We're at either Twitter or Gmail. Our handle for both is YSMY Podcast. YSMY for You Show Me Yours. Mm-hmm. And let's see, we are
Yes.
can't talk.
That's what you can't talk.
I really can't. We have new episodes every other Wednesday, so check back in 2 weeks for our latest. Or you can subscribe to us on most of the major podcast providers, including Apple Podcast and Spotify. And while you're there, we would love it if you would rate, review, subscribe, etc. Tell your friends about us. Mm-hmm. We know that we have listeners on 4 continents. We'd love it to be 5, even 6. 7 is probably a stretch.
Probably.
So, and then tune in next episode when we are going to be watching Dick. It's not a porn.
Dick.
We are going to have fun saying it, though. Dick. I don't know why we do that, but we do. So we'll get it out of our system before then, and we'll talk about Dick with Kirsten Dunst and Michelle Williams and everybody's favorite all-purpose guy, Dan Hedaya.
All-purpose Cuban, not Cuban, American.
Right. This time he's the American president. So anyway, so tune in next time for Dick. Thanks for listening. We'll see you later. Bye.
Bye. The You Show Me Yours theme song is Uplifting Electronic Indie by Winnie the Moog from filmmusic.io. All right, you ready?
Yes.
We're recording. Unfortunately, we didn't get all that gold of my Carl impersonation cracking you up.
What's wrong with you? Jeez.
I hadn't pressed record yet.
I'm sorry. Have a hot mic all the time. Jeez.